It is William McComb, social worker and chemical dependency counselor. And we're making another video today in our series. Today we're going to talk about cravings. And we always make these videos for the benefit of our clients. But this one in particular, I want our clients to share with their family and with their support team, because I think it gives some context into what the client or what the person in recovery is going through. So I think it's important to recognize that everyone has cravings and that it is a normal part of our life, a normal part of our development. The things we crave, in fact, are usually the things that we need the most, right? So we crave food, we crave sex, we crave social interaction with one another, we crave the outdoors, sunshine, things like that. And when we engage in those behaviors, it gets that reward circuitry in the brain going, and we feel a sense of well-being. I mean, after you eat, right, you feel pleasant. And not only do you get that sense of well-being, but your brain again records this as an important activity, and it also makes it more likely that you're going to repeat this behavior. So when you think about cravings, they're essentially, the reminder system that is part of our design that reminds us and that nudges us towards our needs and getting our needs met. So, not every craving that we have is going to be good for us, quote unquote good for us. But when we get this part of our brain, this reward circuitry going, and our dopamine levels rise, our brain is going to record it as an important event. So this system of, again, cravings and cravings being fulfilled that is so important to our development, right? It keeps us healthy, it nudges us towards the things that we need the most, can actually work against us, and so the wrong thing, excites us. And there's examples like they say that a notification that you get on your phone or email, that creates a dopamine response. And so your brain registers this as important. We incessantly check it. We're always trying to fulfill the craving, but it may not be good for us, So this brings us, kind of full circle back to drug abuse. Drugs of abuse, and it doesn't matter which drug it is, cocaine, methamphetamines or opiates, they all act differently on the brain, but one thing that they all have in common is that they hijack and compromise this reward system in the brain. And when you take drugs, again, it raises the dopamine level in your brain well beyond anything that you could naturally, could be naturally occurring. Many times. So you take note of this. This is a very important thing that just happened. All of this dopamine, this must be very important. And the more drugs you take and the more dopamine that's released in your brain adjusts to that. And so now the drug user has to take more and more drugs. That's what they call tolerance. Has to take more and more to get the same effect. So what this is doing is that the drug use is slowly becoming the loudest voice in the drug user's head. It becomes the loudest craving, and it becomes very, very difficult to ignore. So while that's happening, while the dopamine levels are rising and while your brain is adapting to that, also the things that used to bring you pleasure, those natural cravings that we've been talking about, diminish, because you can no longer get the response in your brain that's needed for things like eating and sex and sunshine, and to give you that feeling of well-being and euphoria that was so important, right? So again, the system gets hijacked by the drugs, and we start to see the drugs as the most important thing, And the other things in our life that used to bring us pleasure, our hobbies and our family and all of those variables that used to excite this reward system, are no longer important and become just secondary to the drugs. The drugs now are not just the loudest voice in their head, it's the only voice in their head. But there's one other thing that's happening that I think is worth understanding here. There's another part of your brain, frontal cortex. It's the last part of your brain to fully develop. They say it usually doesn't fully develop till you reach about 25 years of age. And it explains a lot, because this is the part of the brain that's responsible for reasoning and weighing consequences. And what we know about people, young people that don't have a fully developed frontal cortex, is that they don't weigh their consequences very well. They might go 100 miles an hour down the street, at 17, but at 37, you're like, oh, there could be a car coming, and so you're much more cautious so that you can weigh the consequences of your actions. But what they found, been able to measure through brain scans, that a person in recovery, someone who's abused drugs for a long period of time, these two parts of the brain, again, the reward center that gives us those impulses and cravings, right, should be working in concert with the part of the brain that helps us reason and weigh the consequences of our actions. But what they've shown through brain scans and imaging is that in an addict, these parts of the brain have become functionally disconnected. And so you get that impulse or that urge to go, and it should be followed instantly by, but wait, last time, your electricity got cut off and you didn't have money for junior shoes, and all of that should be going through your head and helping you to modify and understand when not to act. But again, what they've shown through these brain scans and been able to measure is that it's all about the go. It's all about the impulse, and the part of the brain that should be coming in and helping to understand when not to act has become impaired. And so that's also happening simultaneously, to the person in recovery. So, understanding those two pieces, gives some context into why this is just so difficult and why people struggle for years. And when we talk about cravings, we're not talking about weeks or months later. Cravings can occur years after the person has ceased the drug use. So this continues and becomes, something that the person in recovery has to continually manage in perpetuity. So, a lot of people then ask the natural question, what do we do about it? Is this reversible? Can we fix this problem? And the good news is that yes, while it may be, something that the client has to manage throughout their, lifespan from now on, it can be brought into what you'd call a remission state. And one of the most helpful tools that we have here is the medically assisted treatment. And that's a decision that's made between a patient and a doctor, and whenever that's appropriate for the patient, it can really benefit in this process. I think people are comfortable with the idea that Suboxone, buprenorphine products do help with withdrawal, but they may not know that they help with craving. And that's specifically what we're talking about here, is craving. And another thing that's important to understand about Suboxone that makes it different, if you remember when we talked about the more drugs you take, the more dopamine you have, the more your brain adjusts, and it's just this endless cycle of more and more drugs. One thing that's interesting about Suboxone is that you don't develop a tolerance. And so over time, you don't need more and more and more to get the same effect. And what that does is it gives your brain a chance to heal. And all of the evidence suggests that the baseline dopamine returns to normal in time. Now, it does take some time, but when you don't have the medically assisted treatment, it's that time that is the enemy. And so by you know, getting the person, you know, adjusted and on Suboxone, it really aids in this process, you know, and it lets them, you know, start working on the tools to manage their cravings right away, you know, because they don't have the deficiencies and the inconsistencies that would be there if the medicine were not in place.